What if your own government declared that the religion you grew up in was practicing a form of psychological violence against its own members? That is the seismic legal battle currently unfolding in France, where the Jehovah's Witnesses organization, the Watchtower, is facing yet another intense government investigation. This time, the focus is sharply on their controversial policies of shunning, disfellowshipping, and social ostracism of former adherents. The implications of this investigation are not just local. They threaten the organization's legal standing across the entire European continent. Following their highly publicized loss of state recognition in Norway over the very same issue, the pressure on the Watchtower is now mounting in Paris. A detailed report from the French interministerial body MIVILUDES, tasked with monitoring and combating cultic abuses, has explicitly highlighted the Jehovah's Witnesses as the primary source of complaints regarding emotional blackmail and coercive disengagement. Testimonies cited in the report paint a stark picture of individuals stripped of their family bonds and social network, with some even suffering severe psychological trauma requiring psychiatric intervention. This global crisis has forced the Watchtower to deploy a widespread counter-campaign, instructing local congregations to flood French authorities with thousands of pre-scripted letters defending the shunning policy as a loving provision. They are pushing their members to assert that remaining in the faith is a personal choice, directly challenging the government's core argument that this practice constitutes psychological coercion. Critics, however, view this as a desperate attempt to manipulate the narrative and use member loyalty to gloss over the devastating human cost of their exclusion rules. We are going to dive deep into the specific details of the French government's report, analyze the Watchtower's defensive maneuvers, and explain why this judicial scrutiny is not an isolated event, but part of a global movement challenging the organization's foundational practices. Do you believe religious freedom includes the right to practice mandatory shunning, or does this cross the line into human rights abuse? Watch this full analysis and share your thoughts in the comments below. Then be sure to like and subscribe for the next vital update on this story. The current investigation in France is not happening in a vacuum. It's directly fueled by a crucial, high-stakes legal precedent set in Norway. For years, the Norwegian government subsidized the Jehovah's Witnesses, but that all changed when authorities began scrutinizing the organization's policies regarding minors. The fundamental issue that triggered this global crisis was the Watchtower's practice of baptizing children as young as 7 or 8 years old, effectively binding them to a set of rules and consequences that they were too young to fully comprehend or consent to. This practice sets the stage for what critics call psychological violence. Once baptized, if a young member decides to leave the faith as an adult or chooses a lifestyle the organization deems unacceptable, the Watchtower's rules mandate that all family and friends still within the religion must completely cut ties. This policy of enforced shunning means that individuals can lose their entire support system, including parents, siblings, and lifelong friends, simply for exercising their freedom of conscience. The Norwegian government ruled that this level of coercion and social isolation violated the human rights of its citizens. As a direct result of this finding, the Norwegian government stripped the Jehovah's Witnesses of their state registration and all associated financial subsidies. This was a catastrophic defeat for the Watchtower, as it established a powerful legal framework in Europe that defines mandatory shunning as a practice contrary to the principles of a democratic state. Although the Watchtower immediately appealed this decision, and has been reporting on its official website that a court of appeals has delivered some temporary favorable rulings, the core legal battle is far from over and continues to make its way through the higher courts. The ongoing judicial conflict in Norway is what gives the French investigation its weight. It proves that governments are willing to challenge religious organizations when their practices are seen to violate basic human rights protections, particularly those of children and vulnerable members. For other nations, including France, the Norwegian case serves as a clear, tangible blueprint, demonstrating how local governments can successfully confront the Watchtower's shunning policy and hold the organization accountable for the devastating consequences it imposes on those who choose to leave. Building directly on the Norwegian precedent, the spotlight has now shifted dramatically to France, where the government is leveraging its own robust structures to address the same issue of spiritual abuse. The key player here is the MIVILUDES, Interministerial Mission for Monitoring and Combating Cultic Abuses, whose recent report specifically names the Jehovah's Witnesses as the primary source of coercive complaints regarding disengagement. Citing Article 31 of France's 1905 law on the separation of church and state, the agency views mandatory shunning as a severe form of psychological pressure that infringes upon a person's ability to freely exercise, or stop exercising, their faith. The MIVILUDES is making it clear. They consider this practice to be a potential abuse of legal protections. The most damning section of the MIVILUDES report is the collection of former members' testimonies, which vividly illustrate the human cost of the shunning policy. These accounts highlight the policy's harshness, noting that many members' social circles were exclusively confined to the organization, making the loss of fellowship an all-encompassing social death. The report details stories of individuals who suffered profound mental health crises, including one woman who ended up in a psychiatric hospital after being expelled, and others who describe the isolation as a debilitating form of emotional blackmail, stressing the undeniable link between the Watchtower's rules and severe, lasting trauma. Crucially, the French report challenges the Watchtower's internal rhetoric directly. While the organization often attempts to frame disfellowshipping as a loving provision intended to encourage repentance, the MIVILUDES counters this by citing the Watchtower's own publications, which explicitly instruct members to stop associating and not even greet ex-members. For French authorities, the evidence is undeniable. This is a deliberate and organized form of social violence. By meticulously documenting these personal impacts and linking them to official Watchtower instructions, France is preparing its own legal battle to hold the organization accountable, setting up a Norway 2.0 scenario that the Watchtower is desperately trying to prevent. Faced with the serious threat of losing its legal standing and tax-exempt status in France, a devastating blow reminiscent of the initial decision in Norway, the Watchtower headquarters has initiated a massive, coordinated counteroffensive. This defensive strategy did not involve reforming the shunning policy or engaging in meaningful dialogue about the psychological harm it causes. Instead, the organization's leadership issued detailed, urgent instructions to all congregations, commanding members to flood the French government with letters of protest during a specific week. This tactic is a direct attempt to manufacture widespread public support and minimize the impact of the damning testimonies collected by MIVILUDES. The leaked instructions accompanying this campaign are highly revealing, outlining precisely what the loyal members must say. They are told to avoid speaking for the organization and, instead, emphasize their personal opinions by using the pronoun I. Members are directed to recount the positive aspects of their faith, cite specific Bible principles relating to love and mercy, and, most crucially, assert that becoming and remaining a Jehovah's Witness was your personal choice, directly refuting the government's claim of coercion and psychological pressure. This strategy seeks to frame the shunning policy not as an abuse, but as a benign, biblically supported act that protects the religious community. However, this reliance on personal opinion rings hollow to many critics. The irony is stark. For years, the Watchtower has meticulously controlled the narrative, discouraging independent thought and personal feelings when it comes to doctrine, only to suddenly demand personal testimonials when facing legal peril. To those outside the faith, these mass-produced letters will simply appear as manufactured consent, a PR tactic orchestrated by leaders who control the information flow and social environment of their followers. It's a classic move to replace inconvenient facts and painful testimonies with a wave of loyalist affirmations. Ultimately, this letter-writing campaign sets up the next critical phase of the French investigation, transforming it into a battle of narratives. On one side stands the French government, armed with legal precedents from Norway and deeply emotional reports of trauma from ex-members. On the other side is the Watchtower, attempting to bury those inconvenient truths under a mountain of carefully scripted, positive testimonials from current members. The outcome will depend on whether the French courts and authorities view the policy as a fundamental religious right or a harmful practice that violates the human integrity of its citizens, confirming whether this is truly a Norway 2.0 for the organization. The saga of the Jehovah's Witnesses in France, clearly mirroring the legal challenges faced in Norway, elevates the debate on religious shunning to an undeniable international and legal sphere. What we are witnessing is not merely a conflict between a religion and the state, but a profound clash between individual autonomy and the coercive demands of a high-control organization. The central question arising from this MIVILUDES report and the ensuing Watchtower letter campaign is this: should religious freedom protect practices that result in severe psychological damage and the destruction of family bonds, especially when they involve individuals baptized at a vulnerable age? The most unsettling point in this French investigation lies in the direct conflict between the Watchtower's narrative of love and choice and the documented reports of trauma submitted to the authorities. On one side, we have an organization instructing its members to protest, asserting that exclusion is a necessary step to protect the congregation. On the other side are the painful testimonies of mothers, fathers, and young adults who were completely isolated, having their entire social life, and in some cases, their mental health, shattered. The requirement for current members to write personal letters in defense of this exclusionary policy only underscores the organization's deep control over the expression and thought of its followers. This moment is a significant turning point. It demonstrates that the awareness and unified voices of former members are, in fact, generating real and tangible consequences. What was once dismissed as an internal issue of a religious denomination is now being reclassified in Europe as a potential violation of fundamental human rights. The final decision in France, much like the one in Norway, will have repercussions extending far beyond European borders, influencing how other nations approach the delicate balance between protecting freedom of worship and upholding the integrity and civil rights of their citizens. Therefore, I want to hear your perspective on this complex issue. If you've watched this full analysis, please take a moment to reflect. Do you believe mandatory shunning should be deemed an abuse or a protected religious practice? Whether you or someone you know has been affected by this policy, your story or viewpoint is incredibly important to this global debate. Leave your comment with your thoughts, share this video to spread this crucial information, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue to track the updates on this unfolding story together.